Oh, there we go.
Ewan, welcome.
Fantastic.
All right. So, Rob, hi, Ian. Rob, why don't you take it away?
Okay, great. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have a bit of a slideshow, which it's the presentation that we're giving today is really focused on a position paper that we've written recently. This is kind of the soft release of that position paper, and it's called "Help Me Out: Why Outdoor Education is More Important than Ever for Canadian Youth." So, Outward Bound is a national organization, and as a national organization, we're eternally grateful to work, live, and play on both unceded territories and in treaty lands across Canada. These are lands from the Lekwungen people on the west coast, the Niitsitapi in the Rockies, the Anishinaabeg in Ontario, all the way to the Mi'kmaq territories on the east coast. And specifically, I live, work, and play within the traditional territories of the Anishinaabeg, the Wendat and Seneca nations. And Toronto, where I'm actually sat now, is the traditional home of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and it's covered by the Williams Treaty of 1923. Now, previous to this treaty, this came under the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, and it was a covenant between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabeg peoples to acknowledge that we rely on the land, which is the dish, and we must live with it and respect it. And so we remind ourselves of this to be sustainable by taking from it with just one spoon. So that's the Dish with One Spoon Covenant. And I also want to acknowledge that I work every day with Indigenous people on our staff, and also I work quite often with Indigenous students, and I'm really appreciative of the learning that I get and the growth that I receive from the people that are currently living with me, and I'm living on their land. And as a newcomer to Canada, I really appreciate how much I've learned from the First Peoples here. My name's Robert Wallis. I use the pronouns he, him. I came over to Canada in 2004 as an academic scientist studying genetics as a postdoctoral fellow. But in 2010, I changed careers to education, and I really wanted to put the outdoors into my teaching. So it was really a match made in heaven when I joined Outward Bound, who wanted to increase their focus on education. And then I became principal and the curriculum and education manager. And more recently, I've really been focused on educational impact and also the societal impact of outdoor education programs. Over to you, Sean.
So I'm hoping folks can hear me. I know you can't see me. We have a little technical challenge. But I have a lovely circle picture on the right-hand side of the screen, so feel free to enjoy that. So I am currently the manager of urban wilderness programs based out of Toronto, and also doing outreach with Outward Bound. It's a recent move for me. I'm 25 years in the public education sector as a teacher and elementary school principal, but put that behind me during COVID to focus on what I really love, which is working with kids outside and getting kids outside. And so I really find Outward Bound is a great organization to help deliver a powerful message to kids about the power of nature and our growth within it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Hopefully you'll get to see Sean, because maybe he's in a cool locale like our Brickworks location. Who's to say? So my name is Heather Mills. I am the head of marketing and communications here at Outward Bound. And I'm going to kick us off. And Rob, if you want to flip to the next slide, please. I'll just give you a bit of an overview of what we're going to be talking about before we start talking about it. So first, we'll start in with a bit of an introduction for those of you who might want to learn a bit about who or what Outward Bound is. Then I'm going to zoom out and talk a bit about what we're seeing in terms of like some of the societal trends and how those trends kind of dovetail with our work and our work specifically with youth. Rob is going to go into outdoor education's value proposition for youth. We're going to have a bit of a question for everybody, and then Sean will close off by talking a bit about specifically our school and group offering. And if you have any questions as we go, just drop them in the Q&A tab, and Rob and I will get to it at the end. And we've reserved some time for questions because we really want to hear from you, each of you in the session. So a bit about Outward Bound. We are national in scope. We are a charity, and really we are a sector leader within the outdoor education sector. We have been working in Canada for over 50 years. We've served over 150,000 youth since 1969, which is when the school opened in Canada. And for those of you who are familiar with the brand, there's Outward Bound schools, all over the world. So there's 38 schools in 35 countries across 6 continents, everywhere from Outward Bound Oman to Outward Bound in New Zealand. So each school is a bit different, has a different character. But here in Canada, our programming really focuses on youth. And our sweet spot is really, that teen audience, that 12 to 19 kind of group. We, as Rob said, we have worked with education providers and Sean as well. We work with many education providers across the country, and we ourselves are a certified education provider. And one thing that I'll highlight recently here, which may be of note for those of you on the call, is in last year, we were the recipient of a substantial pot of funds from the federal government through their sectoral initiatives program. This was a post-COVID, well, maybe not post, who knows where we are in the COVID journey, but an initiative by the government looking at sectors that really needed to build back better after or during the pandemic. And so some of those sectors identified were like tourism and hospitality. And so for us, our submission was what can Outward Bound Canada do to build back the outdoor sector, specifically those working in the outdoor sector? How can we help build that back better? And what we proposed doing and what we received funding to do is to really build up, develop, and run the Outward Bound Canada Training Academy for outdoor professionals. And basically the school or the academy, it's free to attend for participants. We're running a cohort actually in September, is really about how can we attract people to this business, back to this business, new, fresh to this business, upskill them or give them the skills and certifications they need to then go on to jobs in, Parks Canada, as wilderness guides, wherever people choose to take this knowledge and these skills. But really, how can we help to diversify the sector and really make sure that the outdoor sector and those working in it reflect the Canadians who are using these spaces? So a very exciting initiative that we're working on right now. And we frequently talk about this on our social media channels. So if you're looking specifically for information on that, it's on our website, and social is also a great place to find that information. So Rob, maybe next slide, please. So here I've dedicated a slide to our mission because I think it's worth just calling out on its own. So at Outward Bound, the reason that Rob and Sean and I get up every morning is we really believe that youth from all socioeconomic backgrounds deserve the access to quality outdoor education opportunities that will really equip them for those future successes and empower them to realize their full potential as individuals. And Rob, next slide, please. We hear a lot from people, and maybe some people in our session even have done an Outward Bound course. If you have, we'd love to hear from you. Drop that in the chat. But, people say our courses are truly life-changing. And I thought I'd include the voice of a youth here because, we truly start everything with our youth perspective in mind. So this is what we heard from Andre, and this is what we heard last year. So Andre went on a 14-day flatwater canoe trip in Northern Ontario, and he said, I was hoping this would be a new experience. I was looking for an adventure, and I wanted to meet other kids. I was feeling depressed that summer after school ended in 2021 because online school was one of my only ways of staying in touch socially during lockdowns. I was hoping to meet new people and make new friends, and it sounded like it would be really life-changing. And then on the next slide, we'll hear from his parents' perspective. Rob, if you could advance. So when Andre came back from his trip, this was his mother's perspective. So she said, people said to me, this trip is going to change him. And I thought, I don't want him to change. But he came back, more mature, independent, respectful. He came back chipping in more as a team member at home. He emerged a happy, healthy, optimistic teenager who could finally see the possibility of an amazing and fulfilling life laid out for him. So I think when we consider these two perspectives together, to me, that goes a bit into that value proposition that Rob will talk about. But I'm going to speak now about kind of three other main areas. So as we heard from Andre's perspective, there's been some heaviness, I think. And, we can all agree, I think everybody here is here because we interact with youth in some constructive way. So a lot of this is from our recent position paper, which Rob alluded to, which you can read on our website. It's called Help Me Out, How Outdoor Education Impacts and Empowers Youth to Thrive. But, even before 2020, there was record levels of stress and anxiety. There was, the term climate grief kind of surfaced as something that to put words to how people were feeling about, the environment. It was a really complicated and tough job market. And then, layer COVID on top of that. And those were 2 long, lonely years that kids were inside and on screens. And as our position paper kind of pulled together a lot of this research, apparently, almost 2/3 of youth aged 15 to 24 reported the pandemic had harmed their mental health. And, institutions from MAC kids to sick kids were all saying, we are seeing a tremendous increase amongst youth in everything from eating disorders, substance abuse, suicide attempts, higher risk of stress due to social isolation. It was all there. And then layer that on with the fact that, youth weren't getting outside as much. They weren't getting that physical activity. They weren't connecting with nature. And then honing in even further, we also know that the pandemic really disproportionately affected certain communities more than others. So Black, Indigenous, people of color, there's multiple sources of research that say this group was definitely amongst those reporting the least amount of physical activity and a lack of access to outdoor spaces. And then I think even if we zoom out from that to look at, I'm talking all the doom and gloom, so sorry everybody, but obviously we know there's bright spots in here, but just placing this into some things that we're grappling with at a societal level, the lockdowns we all endured were very successful at containing outbreaks, but there were also a cost to them, right? Financial worries, unemployment, housing insecurity, conflict, schooling disruption. So all of these things are quite stressful. What we're seeing now, and we see this at Outward Bound, it manifests for us in the amount of youth we have every year applying for subsidies and funding to access our trips, is that there's an affordability crisis right now that is undeniable. And, as Rob knows quite well with the work that he does here, that climate crisis, climate grief, these are all very real things that youth, but then, people wider are really grappling with as well. And then our next sector that we really wanted to take a look at, and this is the last thing I'll say before I pass it over to Rob, is in the coming weeks, for those of you who read the Toronto Star, who are in Ontario or read online, there'll be an op-ed from Outward Bound co-authored with the Conference Board of Canada. And really what we share in the op-eds, it's a real sneak peek, everybody, but what we talk about in the op-ed is the Conference Board as an entity. Part of what they do is they go out and they talk to the business community, they talk to employers from coast to coast. And one of the things that we realized when we were talking to them is they were saying what we are hearing hands down consistently from employers is that there is a skills gap in the workforce. And they pinpoint the skill gap around really like 6 key skills that employers are saying entry-level hires are really struggling with. And those things are leadership, cultural competence, resiliency, problem solving, collaboration, and communication. And specifically within communication is active listening. So these things are a huge skills gap that is literally costing billions. They say they've estimated that to be around a $6 billion gap that employers are having to close. So how can we close the skill gap? And for those of you who are savvy, you might have guessed the answer, but I will pass it to Rob, and he will get to what one of the ways to close this gap is.
Thank you, Heather. Me again. So, as Heather mentioned, this is kind of the soft launch of our position paper, Help Me Out, How Outdoor Education Impacts and Empowers Youth to Thrive. And this was co-written with Natasha Singh, a colleague of mine. And really within this paper, we talk about 4 undeniable facts about outdoor education. So outdoor education builds essential skills and attributes, such as those that Heather has mentioned. And these are skills that are in demand by employers and give participants advantage in the job market. Outdoor education improves mental health, especially through the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw that youth with connections and access to the natural world are more resilient and report better health. Unfortunately, though, there is inequitable access to outdoor education. It's undeniable that access to the outdoors is not equal. It's expensive. Education by itself is expensive, and outdoor education is at the higher end of that expense as well. So those on a lower socioeconomic scale have problems accessing it. In addition, Black, Indigenous, and people of color youth report they also don't have the same opportunities to access nature and access outdoor education. But outdoor education and outdoor education fosters lifelong connections to nature. It builds those skills, but those skills are long-term. And so youth have a greater ability to manage life's challenges and positively contribute to society. So I'm now going to go through these and show evidence collected to show these undeniable facts about outdoor education. First of all, this is the kind of agenda for my little section. I'm going to define what outdoor education is. It's a huge subject. I'm sure lots of us here work in outdoor education. But I'm going to talk then about what I know. So I work for Outward Bound and how that fits into the greater realm of outdoor education. And then I'm going to talk about what it means, what's our pedagogy, what it means to be outward bound. Then I'm going to get into the meat of the position paper and talk about the evidence that outdoor education builds skills, improves health, that there's inequitable access, and it leads to societal change. And then I'll hand over to Sean for an educator's perspective, and we'll finish off with some questions. So to start with then, defining outdoor education. The types of outdoor education are far-reaching. So it goes from outdoor learning in the schoolyard to forest schools, to field studies and scientific studies involving environmental projects, to outdoor pursuits such as zip lining and wakeboarding, and then journey-based programming, which is more what we do with exploration. And it's really fascinating coming to some of the sessions during this summer conference, learning about how exploration coupled with scientific research is so fascinating and so impactful for the youth that Canadian Geographic reaches. But there are some components of outdoor education that are common. They have to be outdoors, they're experiential, they involve social interaction, and they stimulate all of the senses. Invariably, they have participants engaging with nature, and invariably they're very active. One study showed common features of the most successful outdoor adventure programs take place in unfamiliar natural environments. They consist of challenging activities that take place in small group settings, and they're guided by experienced and skilled instructors. So how does Outward Bound fit into this overall realm of outdoor education? Well, Outward Bound leads adventurous expeditions through Canada's best classrooms. We have various bases across the country, from Vancouver and British Columbia, where we take participants sea kayaking and also surfing. We're in the Rocky Mountains, where we go backpacking and mountain climbing. We're in Toronto, where we have canoe expeditions and hiking expeditions within the urban setting, and the wider Ontario landscape through Temagami and Georgian Bay with canoe expeditions, and then all the way over to the East Coast in Atlantic Canada, where we do backpacking and sea kayaking. So how do we teach? How do we use these activities and these expeditions to teach the skills that we've been talking about? So I've talked about the places, the wild natural environments on the top right there. But that, coupled with our process of authentic adventure, and those are the activities that we use, build authentic adventure, and we're able to learn through that adventure through journey-based and experiential programming. And then the skills of our instructor really bring out through those social interactions, those environmental situations, those interpersonal skills. And then lastly, when we connect those qualified and experienced industry professionals with the wild places that we work in, those are the technical skills that students build and learn. And all those aspects together lead to this huge impact that we see in our alumni. Specifically, our curriculum is focused on building resilience through unpredictable challenges. Students learn how to self-regulate, how to make decisions and set goals. We build social emotional intelligence, where through students collaboratively problem solving, they're building teamwork, they're building communication skills and creativity. And through our environmental leadership curriculum, students demonstrate citizenship through projects connected to the environment, and they take responsibility over how they appreciate and protect the natural world. So now I'm going to go deeper into the evidence behind the Help Me Out paper. It's available on the website for you to download and read in full, and we'll provide a link at the end. But firstly, how do we build those essential skills? So going a little bit deeper into those three aspects of our curriculum, we build resilience through building self-efficacy with students taking initiative and making decisions to adapt, building adaptability. And then through managing emotions, students learn to stay motivated. They embrace the challenge and set goals to be effective. We build social emotional intelligence by building social awareness through this kind of microcosm, this fast track way of building social competence. Students learn to manage their relationships. We're not frightened of having those difficult conversations when we're out in the field, because we really need to be cohesive as a group. And then students learn responsible decision making through various situations that happen socially and environmentally. There are decisions to be made at every opportunity. And then our environmental leadership is really focused on that nature immersion, which gives situations where we can go deep into service learning with our environmental projects. And then students build leadership skills, both for the course itself, but also how are they going to take that forward into life beyond the course and use those leadership skills to advocate for environmental projects that they can then take forward after the course. So these are skills that many different organizations have highlighted are trending and will be of increasing importance in the future. For example, here, the World Economic Forum identify complex problem solving, active learning, leadership and social influence, and emotional intelligence are hugely important for future employees. As mentioned, the Conference Board of Canada, the fundamental skills of communication and thinking and solving problems are hugely important to tomorrow's employers. Personal management skills, such as being responsible, being adaptable, learning continually. And then the teamwork skills, such as working with others and participating in projects and tasks. Now, the Conference Board of Canada produced a report a couple of years ago on education and skills. This was focused on business schools, but I think it's appropriate for a number of education realms as well, where they showed that that schools are inadequately, and specifically business schools, are inadequately teaching the full skills inventory or preparing new graduates for work, but employers are increasingly demanding these human skills, and they're finding them in short supply among their new hires. So they were, when they were asked about this, the answers were, well, these skills are easier said than done. It's really hard to assess these. It's hard to define the learning outcomes and meet accreditation standards. And they summarized this report by saying the jury is still out on whether human skills can be taught, and if so, how. So most human skills training happens outside the classroom in the form of extracurricular non-credit initiatives. So in conclusion, they said, they challenged business school to find new and innovative ways to bring human skills training into the classroom. Well, I would posit that we need to take human skills training outside the classroom and out into the natural areas on outdoor education programs. We've been doing this for over 50 years, and many other outdoor education institutions have been doing that longer as well. And we know the answer. We know that to build socio-emotional skills in youth, that outdoor education is one of the best ways and the fastest ways to build that education. So how do we know we're doing a good job? Well, we've been testing our out. Canada is part of an international network where 150,000 youth per year go through an outward bound program. And we've pulled from various validated evaluation tools in peer-reviewed journals, such as the Brief Resiliency Scale, the Life Effectiveness Questionnaire, the Scale, and the Nature Connectedness Index. And we pulled questions from these to ask our students, both before outward bound, where they were at, and then how has their outward bound experience affected them, and where are they at after their outward bound experience. We do this electronically, offline on tablets, but here's a paper version of the questions that our youth are asked. And as I mentioned, this is international, across 150,000 youth internationally per year. And we've shown in Outward Bound Canada that 81% of students increased in self-confidence due to their Outward Bound experience. By a whopping 20% was the increase. 77% of students increased in social competence by 16%. And 76% of students increased in environmental responsibility by a level of on average 15%. So now I'm going to provide some evidence on how outdoor education improves mental health. So there have been a number of studies on this both before and after the pandemic. But one study showed 5 expedition skills that really carried us through a pandemic. First of all, dealing with the unexpected, working with less resources, finding comfort in solitude, but then recognizing that we need community, and also how to develop compassion for others. This study looks at the effects of an outdoor education program on mental well-being. It's a bit counterintuitive because it actually scores low levels of well-being. So you can see as we go through time along the bottom from October, November, January, March, at the start of the pandemic, the participant in group in blue, although starting with an increased low level of well-being, that level decreased as time went on. Whereas the control group, the comparison group, although they started with a lower level of low well-being, increased over time. Through our own results, looking at resilience, through a literature search of how resilience affects individuals And through our survey from alumni from 5 to 10 years post-course, we show that 40% of our individuals indicated greater control over physical and mental health, and 55% of individuals were able to manage depression and anxiety in a much more prepared way. 80% were much more prepared to manage stress in their lives. At the bottom, there's societal impacts, but I'll go into that a little bit later in the presentation. Unfortunately, the undeniable fact that there's inequitable access to outdoor education is so true in Canada. So outdoor education programs through the public education systems have been reduced, if not eliminated entirely, for various reasons. There's risk management concerns and barriers. There's a perception that what we do is very hazardous, but we have risk management protocols that alleviate those hazards. And so the perceived risk of what we do is generally pretty unfounded. There's an increased general focus on academic success rather than life skills. COVID-19 was hugely disruptive for the outdoor education industry. We were the first to close and we were the last to open because of COVID-19 restrictions. In general, in the education system, there's cost and budget cuts, and outdoor education is usually the first to get cut. But generally, it's a very expensive, and this is why it gets cut at the start, is because there's general affordability issues with outdoor education. Now, there's one sector where outdoor education is growing, and that's in the private school sector. And that's because of how important private schools really place outdoor education in their education strategies. Parents really understand the benefits of outdoor education, and so they put it front and center on their websites, front and center on their prospectuses, and front and center in their education strategies. In the public education system, unfortunately, this is a report from the Toronto District School Board on CBC, where because of the $67 million budget hole that the school board found itself in, they were proposing the shutdown of 4 out of the 10 outdoor education centers. They managed to save a few of them, but they still closed at least one of their centers. Now, Ontario is the only province with specific funding for outdoor education, but that allowance is under $10 per student. That's not enough to operate one outdoor ed center. So boards allocate from other money. So schools fundraise or they supplement with the school budget, which in itself then gives a huge inequality to which schools can afford outdoor education and which schools cannot. Historically in Ontario, every grade 6 student would get a single week-long outdoor ed experience, and now that's reduced to on average 2 nights per student for their entire school career. And the funding for education is due to decrease. The Ontario government intends to maintain a 1% growth, while inflation and enrollment is both projected to increase by 2% annually. Now, other provinces, there's no specific funding for outdoor education. So, for example, in British Columbia, the BT Teachers Federation estimates that funding is about $1,800 below the national average per student. But in BC, teachers have a lot more flexibility of how to teach, but there's no funding specifically to take those students outside if they choose to do that. And the other provinces are very similar as well. So finally, I want to finish off with the long-term societal change that outdoor education provides for our participants. So we were very fortunate to partner with Bain & Company. This is a consulting company that gave us pro bono work looking at our social return on investment. So that's how much does our work really give back to society. So they used our post-program results that I've already showed you through that survey, but then they went back to our alumni from 5 to 10 years ago to show whether those outcomes were sustained over time. And then because we've used validated, peer-reviewed evaluation tools, we were able to compare that with other studies where a monetary amount was involved to look at the long-term societal impacts and put that dollar amount on there. And resilience, so an increase in resilience from our Outward Bound programs show a $4 million saving in lifetime mental and physical healthcare costs, but also a $5 million workplace productivity benefits increase due to improved mental health. That's due to less time off work, for example, and more able to focus on the job at hand. Our greater leadership and social connections led to 80% of our participants being more confident and more able to collaborate. That led to a whopping $40 million in higher lifetime earnings and welfare savings. But I really want to highlight this figure on the bottom right there, with the struggling youth, so youth who were projected to fail and their high school, had a 65% higher likelihood of completing high school after their outdoor education experience. With our environmental leadership program, we promote strong environmentalism, with 85% having a stronger connection with nature, leading to 75% increase in their environmental awareness and 70% more likely to make eco-friendly choices. There's no dollar amounts to this because it's such a huge topic with many moving parts. It's really hard to put that dollar amount on. But from the other results that we got, Bain were able to show that every dollar donated to Outward Bound returns at least $13 in value to society. And that's not just Outward Bound. That's every outdoor ed program gives back more to society than is put in. So the investment is worth it. So much so that in 2019, from all the participants that we saw Outward Bound in 2019, there's a $50 million benefit to society contributed from all of those participants put together. So we have two key recommendations to policymakers in the conclusion to our position paper, Help Me Out. We call on the federal government of Canada to invest in community-led programming that provides outdoor education and recreation opportunities to youth disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, including historically and currently marginalized communities. And we urge provincial education ministries across Canada to include outdoor education in their strategic plans and make high-quality outdoor education programming available to all public students. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Sean now, who's going to give an educator's perspective. And let's see if this works with connecting through a different platform. Are you there, Sean?
I believe I am. Can you hear me, Rob?
Yes, you're a bit echoey, but go ahead. I think we can work with this.
All right, I'll try and avoid the echo. So Rob has pointed out some extremely important barriers to outdoor ed. And I don't think that schools in general and school boards and ministries are against the concept of outdoor education, but I think for far too long it has been viewed as an extra, something to be an add-on. And when we see that the boards like the Toronto District School Board are down to 2 nights of outdoor ed in a student's entire school career from kindergarten to grade 12, we know that from our research that needs to be better. And so Outward Bound is striving to help fill that gap and is encouraging those power brokers who are out there to support us in that move forward. We have a lot of different programs at Outward Bound. And as I mentioned at my introduction, I've been a teacher and principal in the public school sector for 25 years. And I know the value of outdoor ed for my students, but it is a challenge to get access to that for them. So organizations like Outward Bound are fantastic in that their goal is to have 80% funded programming, which helps alleviate that cost. They have access to expert instructors, which alleviates the personnel problem. And we in the education system have the students who are ready and able and in need of this kind of education. We have a variety of programs at Outward Bound that range from urban wilderness programs, leveraging the green spaces in the backyards, to our own schools, so that our Outward Bound programs can be run locally. And then, as Rob showed in the wonderful slides and Heather described, we have classrooms, quote unquote, space that is true wilderness, that is many long hours of bus rides away from the home of these students. But the end result, whether they are doing a hike through a local valley or whether they are canoeing across Temagami, is that they are learning and building. Oh, look at me! They are learning and building that communal, collective life and resilience. I liken outdoor ed to, some people think outdoor ed is about learning how to set up a tent or how to paddle canoe. And it is kind of that, but it is as much like that is for an English teacher. It's not about pen and pencil. They're not teaching pencil. They're not teaching pen. They are teaching literacy, and they are teaching their students to have the ability to write a cohesive essay or a wonderful novel. And the pencil, pen, and paper is merely the tool. And for us at Outward Bound and in outdoor education, the camp stove, the tent, and the canoe paddle are merely tools to get at greater life skills of resiliency and self-empowerment and growth in character. And it's something that I think schools don't overtly teach as much as outdoor education does. In-classroom education focuses on that written curriculum that comes from ministries. Outdoor education gets at all those learning skills that the teachers are expected to address, but that in reality tends to be byproduct of other things that they're doing. Whereas for us, the camping and the canoeing skills are the byproduct, and we are out there hopefully overtly teaching all those other life skills that we're trying to get at. I think that's my time, so back to you, Rob.
Okay, we have another educator's perspective that I will just share with you here, just to finish off.
Working with Outward Bound is really positive. Some of the challenges for youth groups or school groups is dealing with a lot of the logistical pieces. So dealing with gear, dealing with locations, dealing with risk management, and having Outward Bound's experience to come and work with a pre-existing school group is really advantageous. But on top of that, you have staff connected with Outward Bound who are really skilled at working with youth, working with very diverse youth and youth of all different backgrounds. It's a real match made in heaven for a youth group like us coming together, where that really complements itself.
So I have been doing our Outward Bound program through my school for 2 years now. I learned that I am capable of more than I thought I was. I also learned a lot about how my skills and my classmates' skills could mix together to create something we didn't think was possible. That came down to teamwork when we were canoeing, or even just cheering each other on when we were all snowshoeing and it was freezing cold. The trips have made me see that I am capable of more than just what's in front of me, and I'm capable of doing a lot of things.
It's not every day that people get these kinds of opportunities, and it's definitely not everyone. I feel so privileged, and I feel like people who do these trips, it definitely has a lasting impact in their life for sure, and it shapes who they are as a person.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I've just been on vacation, and I got to see those videos when I came back, and it's really inspiring to see the youth really talk about being outside and what they learn from being outside, and it's really inspiring for me. just to know that our work is having such an impact, and it's really inspiring for me to put my best foot forward to try and really talk to administrators, talk to policymakers, to really improve the perception of outdoor education. So I think we'll open it up for questions now. So I think it's just in the chat or in the Q&A. There's a Q&A section there. Open Q&A. There we go. So I've opened the Q&A section. If you could ask any questions you have there, that would be much appreciated.
As people are postulating their thoughts on a question, I think it's really interesting as we look at those two videos, a teacher and a student, that when they were asked, what did you get out of this outdoor education experience? They didn't say, oh, I learned how to put up a tent, or I learned to paddle a canoe, or I learned to build a campfire. They talked about the life skills that they got out of this, and they weren't prompted for that. This is what came to them initially. They had that self-realization that this trip was not about the hard skills that they needed to get from point A to B on this journey, but about those soft skills that will carry with them throughout their life.
So while people are thinking of some questions for us, I have some questions that I'm going to put in the chat. So what I want you to do is to really think about how do you maintain, and I'm not sure what backgrounds you have, whether you're in education or in research, but have a think about how do you maintain contact with your alumni, your participants, whether it's students on research projects, or whether it's students in your school, if you already run some outdoor education programs. How do you maintain that contact with your alumni?
Don't be shy.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, and I have another question, which is how do you justify outdoor education to administrators or policymakers? And this is as an organization that's been around for quite a while, and we're one of the larger organizations providing outdoor education. We're trying to get ourselves and the industry in general more recognized in those rooms on the hill with policymakers, and also in school boards, in decision-making meetings. How do you justify outdoor education to administrators or policymakers so that we can advocate for that? Okay, so I think we'll leave it there. I think there's a lot to think about here. I hope you've appreciated the presentation that we've given. I would really encourage you to go to our website, where you'll find this paper. You can download it. I'll just bring it up now so that I can direct you to it. And then
I just put it in the link in the chat.
Look at that. Heather's on it. Great. So if you go to that page, and you'll see position paper, and then also have a look out around early to mid September when we have the full release of the paper with Toronto Star. We've also hopefully have some other articles, for example, in the conversation. And it'd be really helpful if you point towards that with social media and really get some momentum around this to try and make outdoor education more influential, and so it can impact even more youth's lives, and we can improve the perception of outdoor education as a required field, so that more youth can gain these skills. So thank you for joining us. I think we'll sign off there and enjoy the rest of the conference. I think it's just the wrap up now, and I'll see some of you there. Okay, thank you very much.